Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Connecting with Coaches. We're here today to talk about kind of a challenging topic, which is what happens if you have a sibling group who don't do well staying together? What do you do, and why might that happen? So, first of all, why don't we just talk about like what does a typical sibling bond look like? You know, in non-traumatizing homes, non-traumatic early childhoods, kids are going to be kids. Kids are going to love each other and fight with each other and cause problems and be rivals and beat each other up and typical kid things. But there's something that happens sometimes with a trauma bond. You know, Jen or Amy, do you either of you have a good definition of a trauma bond? And I mean, it doesn't have to be like an academic or a one that you're reading from a source, but like, what would you say? Can you describe what a trauma bond is?
Yeah, I would say it is your coping mechanisms coming together. Your trauma coping mechanisms. I am controlling because of my trauma. I am dependent because of my trauma. And together we are codependent. And I have to be this way and I need her to be this way and I have to be this way and I need her to be this way, right? And so it's our coping, our trauma coping mechanisms are how we interact with one another in this role.
Yeah, Jen, you got anything to add to that?
Perfect. I would not add a thing. I think that's a perfect explanation because they do react and interact, right, with each other. So I think that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, and I've heard of families where they've brought maybe a couple of kids home from an orphanage from another country, and the kids almost have like their own special language and won't let the parents in and don't want to give up the language, and so they just speak to each other. And in many circumstances, one is more the parental figure and one is the child kind of figure. And so they don't want mom and dad to step into that. And obviously, they need mom and dad to step into it. But what have you guys seen with your clients or in your personal life? What have you seen when there have been trauma bonds in regard to how they respond to parenting and to each other?
Well, I have a family that I'm working with currently. I've been working with them for a little while, and they brought three children into their home. And the oldest of those children uh, has reactive attachment disorder, but they all three sort of had this trauma bond. And so when the family decided to relinquish the adoption of the oldest daughter, um, the other kids sort of didn't know how to, like, it was almost like they didn't know how to exist without her at first, even though they were extremely relieved that she was gone. They were like missing the parts of her. Like, you know how we always say the good memories always bubble to the top, right? And so those bad interactions and the bad memories that they had of her controlling them sort of like disappeared in their memory. And so they didn't really know how to exist without her until they started coming with their mom to the sessions, and we started to sort of process through, what that was like and how unhealthy that was.
Well, let's talk about, and I don't want you to use this family specifically,
Right.
but what kinds of things would happen in that family to where parents may have to make a decision to separate the kids? What is so bad? Like, all families have challenges with their kids, but what would make it to a point where a family needs to place one of the children outside the home?
Well, I just think when reactive attachment shows its ugly head, it sort of disrupts the flow and the rhythm of everyone else in the family. And I think particularly, the control that some of these kids with reactive attachment, it's like they almost crave it. And so when they're controlling the other two siblings or how many other siblings, that has an effect on the parenting because there's triangulation happening. I've known some clients that have had, the child that has reactive attachment disorder have an affinity for a spouse that causes, a issue within the marriage. And so I think that, it's not like this just wasn't working out. I mean, this was a control issue, a manipulation issue. And I think when people hear control and manipulation, it's like, well, yeah, but don't all kids do that? Reactive attachment disorder has its own nuances that I always tell people nobody else truly gets it unless you live it.
Yeah, I remember one time going to see a therapist who specializes in reactive attachment disorder, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and he was in with a mom, and her kids were out in the waiting room. And I sat there for 15, 20 minutes, and the feelings that came up in me again, triggering obviously me into the memories of what it used to be like in my family. And I remember saying to him, how can we help people who don't know what this is feel that? Like, because you don't have a clue until you have lived in it to know. And it's not the kid's fault. We always say this. It's survival. They're all in survival mode. But the level of control, manipulation, many times even abuse. There's sometimes sexual abuse or different types of abuse within sibling groups.
Emotional, definitely emotional. If you don't do this, I'm not going to be your brother anymore. That's a common
Or
threat.
I'm telling mom or dad.
Or I'm telling the orphanage person, and so they do have that control, but it's sometimes just emotional control over typically younger siblings or at least developmentally behind them. They could be chronologically older, but just developmentally less aware
Right.
and be controlled in that way emotionally too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so sometimes parents find themselves in a position where they're recognizing that this child who's got the reactive attachment disorder, and it's at an extreme level of, a severe level of reactive attachment disorder. And they've tried everything, and the therapists have agreed, and doctors have probably agreed, and teachers have agreed this is not functioning. This family is so dysfunctional, and no one is going to make it in this environment. Like these other kids, you're going to lose them in this environment because they're not able to get the parental child bond. They don't know who they are. They can't figure it out because they're constantly being manipulated and controlled. And so sometimes, as crazy as it sounds, because you just think about it, who in their right mind would want to separate siblings who have already lost parents? You know, it just sounds absurd to have to separate siblings. You think that that would be the worst thing in the world. But what have you guys seen in families where they've had to do that?
Well, I've seen healing happening in that family. Like the family can sort of finally exhale and heal the parts that were destroyed by the reactive attachment disorder. And
Not the child, the reactive attachment disorder. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so oftentimes the child that left the family then can even heal on their own because they're away from the other two or three or four, how many that they've been used to having this, trauma bond with. So no healing can really happen when they're all sort of coexisting. They've operated under this sort of order that they're in because of what they were forced to learn how to function without any supervision,
Right.
any sort of direction. And
Right.
so when you sort of break that apart, then that's really when the parents can step in and help these kids to heal. Even the child that might go to a new family, that person then can finally begin to heal. And sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes that child from afar is still trying to control the original family through contact or letters or whatever it might be. I've had that occur
Yeah.
in clients that I've worked with. And that's where you need to really talk about boundaries.
Well, and you can really see how it impacts the other kids. We've worked with families who have sibling groups. They have had to either place a child in treatment or in a new family or whatever, and they try to continue the relationships, and you can see the anxiety it causes in the kids at home. I mean, they want so badly, just like what you said, Jen. This is the conflicting,
Yeah.
confounding piece of this trauma bond, because they want so desperately, they love their sibling, even though they might be terrified of them and hate them at the same time. But they love them, and that bond goes deep, and that bond was formed through trauma, which created this dysfunctional way of interacting together, like you described, Amy. And so now the kids are separated and they miss each other, but they don't function well together. And so when you try to force conversations and reunification and things like that, it flips right back into that same pattern, and they can't heal.
Well,
And
and the reason for that is that as soon as you say the sibling's name, there is a nervous system reaction. And that is what is it is not just it's not just emotional. It is like in their whole body. I say this name and I freeze, or I whatever, whatever that reaction is. And so the healing that finally has a chance to happen as they're separated, it breaks your heart to think they can't talk on their birthdays or whatever. But honestly, if I could go back and make a change, that would be one of them. And I think my former daughter's new mom would say the same, that we allowed them to talk too soon and they weren't ready, and that happened, I feel like, and it just made it that much harder.
mhm.
um Once they are separated, you get to see, you think you for me, I thought, okay, finally we can like get to the healing part, because we know what we're seeing. And in our case it was like the two are one, and when we need the big girl to make a decision and be vulnerable, we'll get our needs met in this way. When we've determined that a baby would get their needs met better in this situation, well, then we send little one forward. And so we were never differentiated to be individuals, only just going through life as a shadow and as not a whole in myself in these kids. So you hope that when they're separated, okay, you get to, I mean, I remember the first cake I made, it was for my daughter that I still had, and it was, she loved music, and I said, and on the cake I said, sing your song. And that's truly what we wanted for her, was to be who God created her to be. But she was petrified. She didn't know how to do that. She had been doing what she was told, or just how she had been this shadow person, and she was petrified to do anything other than that. And so then it became a real struggle for she and I, because she was desperate for somebody to take that role of her former sister. And of course, I want to be the mom, not the, eternal. I can't be raising an eternal infant. And so we butted heads because she didn't want to individuate yet. It was so hard.
Yeah. Well, and I think that so many therapists and psychologists, they don't see this playing out in real life as often as we do, just because we're in a unique situation helping very specific families with a very specific issue, and it comes up a lot. And so we see it over and over and over again. And it's just a really sad, I mean, the whole thing is sad. If these kids had not had early trauma and to develop reactive attachment disorder, there would be no need to separate. And we have many families with sibling groups that don't need to be separated.
Mhm.
And we have families where it's potentially, a biological child, or it doesn't matter. It's not always an adoption issue. It's a trauma issue. It's this reactive attachment disorder and what it does to a little person and how it makes them fight for survival. And so they'll do it in any way possible. And if it means, using and abusing a sibling, then they will do that because it's the only thing they know to do to keep the focus off of them and keep
Because
it
it's
pushing.
always worked. It has always worked in this, we take the children out of the orphanage, but you can't take the orphanage behaviors and beliefs and protocols or systems that they've learned
Or
to
foster
survive it out
foster
of
care
them.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's just a real long haul. It's a real long haul
Yeah.
to keep showing up for them and do it differently, be the one
Yeah.
that can do it differently.
And the
And
reason that we're doing this video is just to be able to have a conversation and talk about some of our experiences and maybe help some people understand how somebody could even think about separating siblings and why, and how healing sometimes can only happen after they're separated. And as cruel as it sounds, maybe it's the most loving thing. Not always, but maybe because it's very, as we all know, we've all been traumatized in our homes, and as we know, it's very, very difficult to heal trauma when all of the people are still in the home, when the patterns just keep on going, they never end. Your body cannot calm down, your nervous system, and sometimes it takes a good chunk of time away to be able to get that healed up. And then the hope would be maybe over time, as the kids grow up and as they're healed and healthy, then on their own, they can come back together at some time and form a relationship that's not based on trauma. And they could have an amazing relationship growing up. That would be our hope. Not to separate them forever, but to separate, to be able to let them each heal and grow and become, like you said, Amy, the kids that God created them to be. So
Mhm.
any last thoughts here?
I would just like to say, you mentioned something before about, the unique niche that we fill for families. And I feel like I'm hearing more and more from clients, and I'm sure Amy and Carrie, you have too. Um, Families have gone to therapist after therapist after therapist. And I'm not saying this to toot my horn, to toot Carrie O'Toole Ministries horn, but a lot of times they say the healing didn't start until we met with one of the coaches with Carrie O'Toole, because they get these unique situations. And I think it's hard for, your average therapist to really understand the nuances and what it's like to live with a kid with reactive attachment disorder.
Mhm.
They don't understand the micro manipulations, the
Right.
the things that are under the surface that we crave for everybody else to understand. And so when you come to us, you don't have to explain that piece,
Yeah,
right?
we
Yeah.
typically tell people, if you're looking for a therapist, they need to be able to almost finish your sentences. If they can't, if they're not tracking with you so well that they just know what you're going to say next, then you need to find somebody else, because this is too complex of an issue. And I remember when I was getting my coaching certification after my master's degree, and they were talking about, like, how do you figure out what your niche is and what you're good at? It's like, well, it's what I lived, it's what I understand, and it's all the nuances of this that most therapists would not get. And nobody that I went to got all the details of it, all of the nuances. So the fact that all three of us have lived it, have the educational experience, as well as the coaching experience with working with hundreds of families over the years, we know this area. It's not that we're so smart, it's not that we're greater than anybody. It's not, has nothing to do with that. It just is the place that God has put us to be able to help the people in this specific area, and we know it. We've been dealing with it for a long time. We meet every week. We keep each other up to date. You guys are both in school still. I'm learning all sorts of stuff from you. You're learning from my experience. So we're all coming together, and really, I don't know of anywhere else that people in this situation could find better help. So if you are seeking help for parenting adopted kids or biological plus adopted or step kids, and you're thinking maybe there's a trauma bond, or I don't know, like, how do I deal with this? Or even, how do I deal with my own kids if we've had to place one of them into a facility or into a new home? How do we deal with the kids that are left? What has happened to them? Like, how do we help everybody heal? That's what we do with parents, with kids, anybody in that situation. So reach out at carrieotoole.com, and we would love to help you. So thank you too. I appreciate you both, and we'll talk again soon.